A participatory exhibition on the history of Columbia Point in Dorchester is taking place at UMass Boston. To tell us about the project are two participants, a UMass graduate student in public history, Judith Marshall, and a former Columbia Point resident, Jim Conway. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also with Judith Marshall, put this on the map for us, especially for people who aren't as familiar with this part of Boston.
Okay, well, it is an area that it's located on a peninsula. It's right next to South Boston, and it's near Dorchester. And right now it's near UMass Boston.
And I guess at one point in history, this was a calf pasture or something? Or?
Yes, it was a calf pasture. The land went through a lot of changes over its history. It used to be a calf pasture. There was a pumping station for Boston sewage. It used to be a prisoner of war camp.
There was a dump there too.
There was a dump there. There was public housing while there was a dump there, and now it's a home to lots of larger institutions.
Jim Conway, you lived in the public housing. This is at a time when, a few years after World War II, everybody thought veterans housing or public housing was a great idea, as long as it wasn't in the backyard. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you there?
Well, for us, when we moved in, it was great because we got a lot more bedrooms, than where we were before. Our family moved in 1953. Our family was large. There were 6 children, my 2 parents. So Columbia Point gave us the opportunity to be in nice surroundings. We loved the beach, we loved the activities, the amount of kids around, the stickball, the play was great. The hard part of it was the isolation. There were no schools, there were no churches at the time, so everything was a walk. Part of that was good that we were in an isolated community, but everything. So in my family, we walked to St. Margaret's School. Other children were bused to schools long before busing was used more routinely in Dorchester.
And of course, to get to St. Margaret's, you had to go over Morrissey Boulevard. You had to go through that traffic rotary there. I mean, it was a bit of a hurdle. Well,
it was also when we were building the original expressway. So we were walking by, when I was going to grammar school, I actually walked by the actual building of the Southeast Expressway, which we've now depressed, but that was actually going up at the time. Also remember that we were doing this in the 3rd grade, the 4th grade, the 5th grade. We were taking that hike. But it was what you needed to do.
Judith, what about the scope of this project? Because it's great to hear from someone who actually lived in this part of the city. But this is a place. It's a territory for institutions. UMass is there, the Kennedy Library. So I guess you really want all these different elements in the mix.
Yes, definitely. We're looking at the history of Columbia Point from the 1940s to the 1990s, and I think with Columbia Point, it's really easy just to focus on the larger institutions, they're really impressive. But the story of the community, the everyday people that actually live there, that's a really important story to tell. So that's really, what we want to focus on a lot. But.
And you have a neighborhood health center there. That's an important part of it. It's a historic health center, really.
Yes, exactly. It was the first community health center in the nation, but yeah.
Jim, you also saw some fairly abrupt racial change at Columbia Point, at least by the time you were coming back there.
Yeah, I did. After my family moved out in the early 60s, I stayed in Columbia Point for most of the 60s as a scout leader involved with the local scout troop. And we certainly saw tensions there. But what was very troubling to those of us who were down there was the view wasn't balanced. There was a view that we had living in the point and working in the point, and there was a very different view that people on the outside. I would tell people where I lived or where I volunteered, and they'd be shocked that I'd go in there. But the community still, even through the struggles right up to the end, was really struggling to support each other, to build a sense of community, to do a lot of good things.
Judith, you're not just writing a history book here. You're doing public history. This means interacting with people, looking for people. What's that been like for you?
It's been amazing. I think we're really excited that we're doing this participatory exhibit where we can really interact with the community. We can get them to tell their stories of Columbia Point, really get their perspective. Because as Jim was saying, when Columbia Point was on the media, it's been really one-sided and really negative, but when you ask the people from the insider's point of view, it's a completely different story, a story of a really strong community, of family. And so by doing this exhibit, we really get to show that story and we get to learn a lot about it.
So what kind of things would be contributed to this?
Well, we're encouraging visitors to bring their stories and their memories from Columbia Point. We have a videographer at the event, so we'll be able to record them. We're also encouraging them to bring photographs and objects. We're inviting them to interact with the exhibit itself. So for example, we have a timeline that outlines the major events in Columbia Point's history, and we're asking people, to add events that they feel that it's important that should be included. They can, contest the events that we have, add their own perspective. So we're really working to build this exhibit together with the community of Columbia Point.
Jim, you've been, I'm sure, talking about Columbia Point for many years, but what's the difference with being able to do it in this way, through this kind of a project?
Well, so since Columbia Point days, I now go to UMass Boston, where I sit as a member of the Board of Visitors, where I advise the Chancellor. And I have the opportunity to look out from the big board meeting and look across the dump that I used to chase the rats in, and look across. As we're getting ready to celebrate the 50th, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of UMass Boston, what I'm so excited about is we're talking about the community, we're talking about the Point, we're talking about Camp McKay, we're talking about Calf Pasture Point. We're talking about things, so it's not just a conversation around a place, but it's a conversation about the people, the place, their courage, and honoring that and memorializing that for future generations.
We should mention the event where people can plunge in here and add to this history.
Yes. So when it is?
Yes.
Okay, yes, it will be on May 9th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's at Harbor Point Clubhouse, which is on 1 North Point Drive in Boston.
All right, thank you both very much for being with us, Judith Marshall and Jim Conway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have more news in just a moment.